Robert Eggers' swing at the classic film Nosferatu, which is to say his swing at Bram Stoker's Dracula, knocks it out the park, in my opinion. But given there are already two great versions of Nosferatu and countless great versions of Dracula, the obvious question to ask is, what sets this rendition of Nosferatu apart from all the competition? Obviously, the most immediate difference is in its form. The original Nosferatu is a film built out of creepy set pieces and set design. It almost functions like a series of photographs taken within someone's nightmare and then brought into motion. It's a masterpiece of German expressionism and is, at the very least visually, pretty scary. Werner Herzog's crack at the story had all the grounded, meandering documentary style that he's known for. Count Orlok there, besides just being played by Klaus Kinski, is treated as a subject by Herzog the same way Aguirre, the Wrath of God, was. He's a freak show oddity, sort of rambling through the world, infecting it with his presence. What avenue does Eggers take for his rendition then? Well, Eggers' filmmaking here, like it is in his other films, is robust, purposeful, and operatic. A lot of the fun I had watching the film came from me just being grateful to see a movie like this in 2025, one which doesn't shy away from telling its story with grand visual gestures. It's an exercise in maximalism, in opposition to Herzog's realism or Murnau's expressionism. Even still though, the film doesn't stray too far from the spirit of the original. It's still a film about evil, it's still a film about lust, a film about infection, a film about dread and obsession in place. The difference though arises in the particulars, specifically in the domain of metaphysics. I was actually kind of surprised to see the movie go in this particular direction. Even knowing Eggers, knowing his obsession with accuracy and esotericism, I still didn't expect this movie, out of all of his work, to go this far into the domain of the historical occult. Let me explain what I mean first. In the original Nosferatu, Count Orlok is obviously a vampire. But a vampire is only a particular form of demon, or at the very least, a particular form of demonic phenomena. He represents the classic deal with the devil trope. He's a human being, abandoned by God, becoming a beast in the stead of his lost humanity, being stranded in his need to victimize, being empowered by it, while also being isolated because of it. He exists solely through parasitism and represents what humanity would become if we lost our soul, both literally and figuratively. Eggers' version of the Romanian Count is the same in every way I've mentioned, except in this is an important distinction. His evil, rather than being purely represented by the Christian notion of it, is instead better represented through other religious models, namely religious models that are more esoteric, mystical, and alchemical. Albin Eberhard von Franz, played by Willem Dafoe, is the film's Van Helsing figure, but rather than being a physician, he's instead interested in the art science philosophy of alchemy. The film goes out of its way to tell us which portrayal of alchemy it's choosing to go with right from its earliest scenes. Our first introduction to this von Franz has him in his home, reading and meditating. When interrupted, he makes reference to his failure to extract gold from lead. The interesting thing about that is that he's not in front of any alchemical equipment when he says this. This isn't a mistake or a quibble on my part. There's a point to why he says this. And this point relates to an often under-discussed and obscure aspect of European history, specifically its history in regards to religions which existed there, but which kept silent and esoteric as a way to evade persecution. Alchemy was a major aspect of these religions. While in some ways, alchemy could be seen as the pseudoscience precursor to chemistry, a more full and accurate account would be to say that it was an esoteric religion, or series of religions, which were disguising themselves as a science to avoid being identified as heretical to the Catholic and Orthodox churches, as well as to Sunni and Shia Islam. Those initiated in the ways of alchemy were less interested in pulling real gold from lead, and more interested in pulling spiritual gold, quote-unquote, from the lead of the human body. In other words, it was a series of rituals and thought processes designed to free oneself from being stuck for lifetimes within the limiting prison of the human body. When and where these ideas originate are hard to place. Greek Egypt is a commonly cited starting point, as Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, and Gnosticism, three distinct but overlapping religions / philosophies, had their likely start there. This subject is an entire rabbit hole in of itself, so to cut it short, what's important here is that the metaphysical perspective of the film, rather than being based on more traditional form of Catholicism or Protestantism, like the original was, is instead based on religious notions much more deep, mysterious, and abstract. This is important, as the evil in the film is then no longer the product of a traditional Satanism, but is instead the kind of evil which shares more in common with the Neoplatonic view. That's to say, it's an evil which exists as a primordial form of being, one which has shape in the here and now, only because it has to if it wants to manifest in the physical world at all. In the world of 19th century Romania, that evil takes the form of a vampire. In the world of the 19th century, scientifically advanced Germany, that evil takes the form of a plague or mental illness. In either case, it's the same evil, just the same evil under various guises, almost shaping itself to suit the anxieties of those it victimizes. The film doesn't say any of this explicitly. This is what I'm intuiting knowing what little I know about alchemy and Hermeticism, which, again, the film makes a note of highlighting. Even the poster itself makes use of the alchemical heptagram used in the film. This is central to the movie's worldview, though embedded without demanding too much attention to itself. These references almost serve as tongue-in-cheek nods to those initiated in these ideas, or at least to those who know of them from a distance. I think the importance of noting these themes, though, beyond just their existence as Easter eggs, comes with the next thing I want to discuss, which is the film's theme of science versus the supernatural. Orlok, early in the film, differentiates himself from the Romanian peasants who live nearby by mocking them for their superstitions. The irony here is obvious, as is his goal for this framing. He presents the supernatural, uncanny, and fantastical as being absurd because he is all three of those things. The last thing he wants is for anyone to recognize him for what he truly is. What's interesting here, though, is the extent he goes to draw that line, going as far as to celebrate Germany for its forwardness in perspective, dropping these mystical explanations for unexplainable phenomena in favor for rationalism and science. In this sense, science becomes as much a part of the evil here as the supernatural evil itself, as Count Orlok's ability to hide himself in plain sight requires a faith in science which makes all onlookers incredulous to the fact that he could be as evil and powerful as he seems to be. The movie doesn't shy away from this evil, or from this power. Orlok often goes far out of his way to be as freakish and as powerful as possible, almost tempting fate in doing so. But again, what threat is there of him being discovered by those who refuse to entertain that evil of this sort can exist at all? Apparently none. Characters are slow to accept the reality of the supernatural, even as they see its machinations before their very eyes, and they only become accepting of the truth after accepting the perspective of the film's most out-there character outside of Herr Nock. It's no coincidence then that Willem Dafoe played a man of medicine, / shaman in Eggers the Northman. His role here isn't much too different. His goal is to bring the characters into the world beyond that which sits visibly in front of them. The interesting thing about these themes is how they interact with the film's metaphysics. If this version of Nosferatu went the stereotypically religious route, then this film would ultimately be a film about faith. But because it doesn't go that way, instead opting for a hermetic, gnostic, and/or platonic worldview, it becomes less about having faith in the supernatural and the primordial clash between good and evil, and more about having knowledge of it. It's about understanding, grasping, and accepting the forces which animate the world, being able to see beyond the material representation of reality, which has only ever been mere facade. Science, while accurate and useful in its ability to examine the physical world for what it is, fails in light of the fact that the world is, always has been, and always will be, a world of spirit and thought first and foremost, and a world of body and shape second. Von Franz, being initiated in this, the world's oldest religion according to its practitioners, gets all this. His obstacle is to convince others to get it with him, which is to say, to get them to accept what they already deep down know. Likewise, Orlok, knowing everything von Franz knows, only hopes that others don't learn it too quickly. The classic vampire theme here then, that of lust, also takes on a strange abstract and primordial form when run through the particulars of this film. The final shot of the movie, where beauty and beast die together, one on top of the other, is also a representation of male and female dying with one another. If you look at the final shot, the way both bodies overlap, it's almost as if they've merged and become one in death. In Hermeticism, this is called the androgyne. The androgyne was the first human, or at least the first form of humanity, to exist. It eventually broke up and splintered into two distinct pieces, and those pieces then became the model for male and female ever since. The goal of humanity then, beyond just striving for immortality, is also the striving for union with the same primordial matter which birthed reality. In order to get there, though, all splinterings of category have to be reversed. Among these is the splintering of the androgyne into two opposite sexes, and being that love and lust between man and woman is among the central thrusts of life, even its central conflict, the merging of the two is one of the most pressing mergers that can be aimed for. Through becoming one with her attacker in the end, Ellen reaches fulfillment. To quote Plato's Symposium, she finds her better half. The lust between the two characters was only ever a lust for unity, or at least that was what it was at the level of the spiritual plane. But from the perspective of the humans who have to live through such horror, references to these higher unities of concept is no consolation. All they're left with is a dead friend and loved one. They still live in bodies, no closer to escaping their physical form than before. Their gold has yet to free itself of the lead which imprisons it. In other words, unlike von Franz, Emma, Eggers himself, and hopefully as many of you listening as possible, our protagonists remain uninitiated.